The morning sun barely touched the narrow alley where Marcus lived with his mother in a tiny room above an old bakery. The smell of bread often filled their space, but they could rarely afford to buy any. His mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and washing dishes at a restaurant during the day. Marcus was 12 years old, and his clothes told the story of their struggle. His school uniform was actually a mix of donated items that never quite matched. The pants were too short, showing his ankles even when he tried to pull them down. His shirt had a permanent stain on the collar that no amount of scrubbing could remove. His shoes had holes in the soles, and on rainy days, his socks would get soaked within minutes. But Marcus never complained. He saw how hard his mother worked, how her hands were red and rough from chemicals and hot water, how she skipped meals to make sure he had enough to eat. School was both a sanctuary and a battlefield for Marcus. He loved learning, loved the way words on a page could transport him to different worlds, loved solving math problems that made sense when nothing else did. But the other children noticed his clothes. They noticed the patches, the stains, the way his uniform hung awkwardly on his thin frame. "Look, it's the garbage boy," someone would whisper loud enough for him to hear. During lunch, he would sit alone in the corner of the cafeteria, eating the simple sandwich his mother had packed before rushing to her morning job. The popular kids sat at the center tables, laughing and sharing snacks their parents had bought from expensive stores. One particular morning, Marcus arrived at school earlier than usual. His mother had an emergency shift, and he'd left home with just a piece of bread for breakfast. The schoolyard was almost empty, but as he walked past the music building, he heard something that made him stop. Piano music floated through an open window, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever experienced. He stood frozen, listening to the melody that seemed to express everything he felt but could never put into words. The sadness of their poverty, the love he had for his mother, the hope that somehow life could be different. His feet moved without him deciding, carrying him closer to the window. He peeked inside and saw an elderly man with white hair sitting at a grand piano, his fingers dancing across the keys with such grace that Marcus held his breath. The old man's eyes were closed as he played, completely absorbed in the music. Marcus didn't know how long he stood there, but when the piece ended, he found himself clapping softly. The old man's eyes opened, and he turned toward the window with a surprised expression. "Come in, boy," the man called out with a gentle voice. "No need to hide outside." Marcus hesitated. He looked down at his dirty shoes, at his stained shirt. What would this elegant man think of him? But something in the teacher's kind eyes made him push open the door and step inside. The music room was magnificent, with instruments lining the walls and the grand piano dominating the center like a throne. "I'm Professor Williams," the old man said, extending his hand. Marcus shook it nervously, aware of his own rough, calloused palms from helping his mother with odd jobs on weekends. "What's your name, young man?" "Marcus, sir." "Tell me, Marcus, have you ever played piano before?" Marcus shook his head, feeling embarrassed. "No, sir, we don't. We can't afford." Professor Williams waved his hand dismissively. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you've played, not if you own one." He smiled warmly. "Would you like to try?" Marcus's eyes widened. Touch that beautiful instrument? Him, with his dirty clothes and rough hands. "I couldn't, sir. I might damage it." The professor laughed, a rich sound that filled the room. "This piano has been played by thousands of hands over 50 years. Yours won't hurt it." He patted the bench beside him. "Come, sit." With trembling legs, Marcus approached the piano. He sat carefully on the edge of the bench, his posture stiff with nervousness. Up close, the keys looked like magic, black and white tiles that could create the beauty he had just heard. "Put your fingers here," Professor Williams guided, positioning Marcus's right hand over the keys. "Now, press gently." Marcus pressed one key, and a single, clear note rang out. The sound sent shivers through his body. He had made that. His finger, his touch, had created that beautiful sound. Again, the professor encouraged. Try these 3 keys together, for the next 20 minutes, before the bell rang for classes. Marcus explored the piano under Professor Williams's patient guidance. He learned the names of the notes, learned how different combinations created different sounds. His hands, so used to carrying heavy boxes and scrubbing floors, discovered a new purpose. When the bell finally rang, Marcus jumped up, suddenly remembering where he was. "Wait," Professor Williams called, as Marcus rushed toward the door. "Come back tomorrow morning. Same time. We'll continue." Marcus turned, his heart pounding. "Really? You'd let me?" "Music doesn't care about the clothes you wear, Marcus. It only cares about what's in your heart. And I heard something in the way you listened, the way you touched those keys. Come back tomorrow." Marcus ran to class, his mind spinning. For the first time in months, the whispers and pointing didn't bother him. Let them call him the garbage boy. Let them mock his dirty clothes. Something had awakened inside him. Something bright and powerful that no amount of teasing could touch. During lunch, as he sat alone eating his simple sandwich, Marcus didn't feel lonely anymore. His fingers tapped silently on the table, remembering the keys, remembering the sounds. He couldn't explain it, but he knew his life had just changed. He didn't know how much, didn't know the journey that lay ahead, but in that moment, holding the memory of those piano keys beneath his fingers, Marcus felt rich for the first time in his life. That evening, when his mother came home exhausted from her shift, Marcus hugged her tightly. "Mama," he whispered, "today, something wonderful happened." And as he told her about the piano and Professor Williams, he saw tears in her tired eyes, and he promised himself that someday, somehow, he would give her a better life. He would make her proud. The piano would be his path. Marcus started waking up an hour earlier each morning. His mother noticed, but said nothing, simply preparing his small breakfast a little earlier than before. She didn't know where he went, but she saw something different in her son's eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. Every morning, Marcus would arrive at the music room before sunrise. Professor Williams was always there, waiting with a warm smile and a thermos of hot tea. The old man would pour them each a cup, and they would sit at the piano as the world outside slowly woke up. The lessons were unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Professor Williams didn't just teach him notes and scales. He taught him to feel the music, to understand that each piece told a story. "Your hands are messengers," the professor would say, his wrinkled fingers demonstrating on the keys. "They carry the emotion from your heart to the ears of the world." Marcus proved to be a remarkable student. What he lacked in formal training, he made up for with an intensity that amazed even the experienced professor. His rough hands, strengthened from years of manual labor, had an unexpected advantage. They were strong and didn't tire easily. Within weeks, Marcus could play simple melodies. Within months, he was tackling pieces that beginners usually spent years working toward, but school remained difficult. As Marcus's dedication to piano grew, so did the bullying. The other students saw him carrying an old music book that Professor Williams had given him. The book's cover was torn, and the pages were yellowed with age, but to Marcus, it was treasure. "Look at the garbage boy pretending to be fancy," Derek, the ringleader of the popular group, called out one day in the hallway. He snatched the book from Marcus's hands and held it high. "What's this? You think you're some kind of musician now?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Give it back, please." "Please," Derek mocked, and his friends laughed. "Maybe if you ask nicer. Maybe if you get on your knees like the beggar you are." Something in Marcus wanted to fight, to swing his fists and defend his dignity. But then he remembered Professor Williams's words from that morning. "Real strength isn't in violence, Marcus. It's in dedication to your art. Let them say what they want. Your fingers will speak louder than their words ever could." Marcus walked away, leaving Derek holding the book. The bully, surprised by the lack of reaction, eventually dropped it on the floor. After they left, Marcus picked it up carefully, wiped off the dirt, and continued to class. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of controlling his anger. That evening, he practiced with such intensity that Professor Williams had to stop him. "Marcus, your fingers are bleeding." Marcus looked down at his hands and saw small spots of red on the keys. He'd been practicing the same difficult passage for hours, and his fingertips had split from the pressure. He hadn't even noticed the pain. "I need to get better," Marcus said quietly. "I need to be so good that nobody can mock me anymore." Professor Williams sighed and gently took Marcus's hands in his own. "That's not why you should play, my boy. Don't let their cruelty become your motivation. Play because you love it. Play because music makes you feel alive. If you play for revenge, you'll never find joy in it." Transfor. Number 4. Marcus nodded. But inside, he wasn't sure he agreed. He wanted to prove them all wrong. Every insult, every laugh, every time someone pointed at his clothes or called him names, he remembered it, and he channeled all that pain into his practice. The months passed, and winter came. Marcus's situation at home grew worse. His mother's restaurant job cut her hours, and money became even tighter. Some mornings, Marcus came to practice with an empty stomach, having given his breakfast to his mother, who'd worked through the night. Professor Williams noticed, but never said anything directly. Instead, he started bringing extra food, claiming his wife had packed too much. "Can't let it go to waste," he would say, pushing a sandwich toward Marcus. "You'd be doing me a favor." Marcus knew what the professor was doing, and his heart swelled with gratitude. This man, who barely knew him, who had no reason to care about a poor boy with dirty clothes, was showing him more kindness than most people ever had. One day, Professor Williams made an announcement that changed everything. "Marcus, the school is having its annual winter concert in 3 months. I want you to perform." Marcus's heart leaped and sank at the same time. "Perform? In front of the whole school? I'm not ready, Professor. And I'm not even a real music student. I don't belong on that stage." "Not belong?" Professor Williams's voice was firm. "You've learned in 6 months what takes most students 2 years. You have talent, Marcus, real talent. But more than that, you have something many trained musicians never find. You have soul. But the other students, they'll laugh. They already think I'm a joke. If I mess up in front of everyone, then you mess up." The professor interrupted. "But you won't. I believe in you, Marcus. The question is, do you believe in yourself?" That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the thin mattress in their small room, listening to his mother's gentle breathing. Perform at the winter concert? Stand on stage in his patched clothes in front of all the students who mocked him daily? The thought terrified him, but another thought excited him. What if he could do it? What if he could prove that the garbage boy they laughed at had more talent in his rough fingers than any of them? What if, just once, he could make them see him differently? The next morning, Marcus arrived at the music room even earlier than usual. "I'll do it," he told Professor Williams. "I'll perform at the concert." "Proberment." The old man's face broke into a wide smile. "Good. Then we have work to do. I'm going to teach you Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It's challenging, but I know you can master it." For the next 3 months, Marcus dedicated every spare moment to that piece. He practiced before school, during lunch while hiding in the music room, and late into the evening until the janitor had to lock up the building. His fingers flew across the keys, gaining speed and precision. The piece was beautiful but demanding, requiring both technical skill and deep emotional expression. His mother noticed the change in him. "What's happening, my son?" she asked one evening. "You seem different." Marcus told her everything. About Professor Williams, about the lessons, about the upcoming concert. His mother listened with tears streaming down her face. "My boy," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you. No matter what happens, never forget that. As the concert date approached, the bullying intensified. Derek and his friends had heard about Marcus's performance and made it their mission to shake his confidence. They would trip him in hallways, knock his books from his hands, and whisper threats about what they'd do if he embarrassed the school with his performance. But Marcus kept practicing. The music became his shield, his refuge, his revenge. Every insult fueled his determination. Every laugh strengthened his resolve. He would show them. In just a few weeks, he would show them all. The night of the winter concert arrived with a bitter cold that seemed to seep through Marcus's thin jacket. He stood backstage, his hands trembling, though he couldn't tell if it was from nerves or the temperature. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the auditorium filling with students, parents, and teachers. The seats were red velvet, the walls decorated with paintings, and the atmosphere felt impossibly fancy for someone like him. Professor Williams appeared beside him, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "How are you feeling, Marcus?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted honestly. His voice shook slightly. "What if I forget the notes? What if my hands freeze up? What if everyone laughs?" The professor squeezed his shoulder gently. "Look at me, Marcus." When their eyes met, the old man continued. "I've taught music for 47 years. I've seen thousands of students come and go. And I'm telling you now, with complete certainty, that you are ready. More than ready. You're going to show them something beautiful tonight." Marcus nodded, trying to absorb the confidence his teacher had in him. He looked down at his clothes, the same worn pants and the cleanest shirt he owned, which still bore faint stains that wouldn't wash out. He'd tried so hard to look presentable, but next to the other performers in their concert blacks and fancy dresses, he felt like he didn't belong. The concert began. Marcus watched from the wings as other students performed. There was Jennifer Chen, daughter of 2 doctors, playing a flawless Mozart sonata on a violin that probably cost more than his mother earned in a year. There was Robert Anderson, whose father owned half the businesses in town, performing Beethoven with technical precision, if not much feeling. Each performance received enthusiastic applause. Then Marcus heard Derek and his friends in the audience. "Can't wait to see the garbage boy embarrass himself," one whispered loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Why did they even let him perform? Look at what he's wearing." Marcus felt his stomach turn. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he should run out the back door and never come back. His hands started sweating, and he wiped them on his pants repeatedly. "Marcus?" Professor Williams appeared again. "You're next. Remember what I taught you. Don't think about them. Think about the music. Think about why you fell in love with piano that first morning. Play for that boy who stood outside the window, amazed by the beauty of it all." The stage manager motioned to Marcus. It was time. He walked onto the stage, and the whispers started immediately. He could hear them, see the pointed fingers, the smirks. His worn shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor. Under the bright lights, every patch on his clothes seemed magnified, every stain highlighted. He sat at the grand piano, and the seat felt both familiar and foreign. This wasn't the practice room piano he'd spent months with. This was the school's finest instrument, meant for concerts and important events. For a moment, doubt crashed over him like a wave. Who was he, to touch such an instrument? A poor boy with dirty clothes who'd only been playing for 9 months? Then he remembered his mother. She was out there somewhere in the audience. She'd taken the night off from work, losing wages they desperately needed, just to see him perform. He remembered her rough hands, her tired smile, her unwavering belief in him. He remembered Professor Williams's patience, his generosity, his faith. He remembered every morning practice session, every bleeding finger, every hour of dedication. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes. The auditorium grew silent, waiting. And then, he began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne flowed from his fingers like water from a spring. Soft, gentle, filled with a melancholy beauty. that silenced the whispers instantly. Marcus forgot about the audience, forgot about his clothes, forgot about everything except the music. His hands moved across the keys with a grace that came from somewhere deep inside him, from all the pain and hope and love he'd carried for so long. The piece built slowly, each phrase more expressive than the last. His rough hands, which had scrubbed floors and carried heavy loads, now coaxed the most delicate sounds from the piano. He played the way Professor Williams had taught him, but he also played something uniquely his own. He played his mother's exhaustion and courage. He played the hunger in his belly and the fire in his heart. He played the mockery he'd endured and the dreams he refused to let die. In the audience, students who had been ready to laugh sat frozen. Parents who had expected an adequate performance leaned forward in their seats. Teachers exchanged glances of amazement. Even Derek, the boy who had tormented Marcus for months, stopped smirking and simply listened. The music swelled to its emotional peak, and Marcus poured everything into those measures. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful despite the complexity of what his hands were doing. He wasn't just playing notes on a page. He was telling his story without words, sharing his soul through sound. As the piece moved toward its ending, the notes became softer again, fading like the last light of day. Marcus played the final measures with such tenderness that several people in the audience felt tears on their cheeks, though they couldn't explain why. When the last note faded into silence, Marcus lifted his hands from the keys and opened his eyes. For a long moment, the auditorium remained completely silent. Marcus's heart sank. He'd failed. They hated it. He started to stand, ready to flee, when suddenly, the silence shattered. Someone started clapping, then another, and another, until the entire auditorium exploded in applause. People stood from their seats. Students who had never spoken a kind word to him were on their feet, applauding. Parents wiped their eyes. Teachers smiled and nodded. The ovation went on, and Marcus stood there stunned, unable to process what was happening. Professor Williams rushed onto the stage, his eyes wet with tears. He grabbed Marcus in a tight hug. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you that you were ready." Marcus looked out at the standing crowd, at their faces filled with appreciation and respect. He found his mother in the third row, tears streaming down her face, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Next to her, Marcus saw something that shocked him even more. Derek was standing and clapping too, and on his face was an expression Marcus had never seen before. Respect. As Marcus walked off the stage, other performers approached him. "That was incredible," Jennifer Chen said, her voice genuine. "I've been playing for 8 years, and I've never heard anything so beautiful." Robert Anderson extended his hand. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus shook his hand, still dazed. "Professor Williams taught me. 9 months ago, I'd never touched a piano before." 9 months? Robert's eyes widened. "That's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was dedication. It was pain transformed into beauty. It was a boy with dirty clothes, who had more music in his soul than many people find in a lifetime. That night changed everything for Marcus. As he walked home with his mother under the cold stars, she held his hand tightly. "I never doubted you, my son." Not for 1 second. Marcus squeezed back, feeling lighter than he had in years. The mocking voices in his head had gone quiet, replaced by the memory of applause, of respect, earned through nothing but hard work and passion. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Didn't know if the bullying would return or if this respect would last. But tonight, he had proven something important. Not to them, but to himself. He had worth. His poverty didn't define him. His dirty clothes didn't diminish him. He was Marcus, and he was a pianist. The morning after the concert, Marcus expected school to return to normal. He expected the respect from the previous night to fade like morning mist, replaced by the usual mockery. But when he walked through the school gates, Something strange happened. People nodded at him. Some even smiled. "Great performance, Marcus," a girl from his math class called out. He barely knew her name, but she waved at him like they were friends. In the hallway, even Derek seemed different. The bully didn't trip him or knock his books down. Instead, Derek gave him a slight nod, almost respectful, before walking past. It was the closest thing to an apology Marcus would ever get, and somehow, it was enough. Professor Williams was waiting in the music room with news that would change Marcus's life again. "Sit down, my boy," the old man said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Something remarkable happened last night." Marcus sat at the piano bench, curious. "What do you mean?" "There was someone in the audience I didn't tell you about. Victor Stanislavski. He's one of the most respected piano teachers in the country, and he happened to be visiting our town. His granddaughter attends this school." Professor Williams paused, letting the significance sink in. "He wants to meet you, Marcus. He was so impressed by your performance that he's offering you a scholarship to study at his academy." Marcus felt like the room was spinning. "A scholarship? But I don't understand. I've only been playing for 9 months. There must be students who are much better than me." "Technical skill can be taught," Professor Williams said softly. "But what you have, that emotional depth, that connection to the music, that's something you're born with." Mr. Stanislavski recognized it immediately. He said, and these are his exact words, "That boy has the soul of a true artist. But what about school? What about my mother?" "The academy has an arrangement with schools. You'd continue your regular education while receiving intensive music training. As for your mother, the scholarship covers everything, and there's even a small stipend for living expenses." Professor Williams leaned forward. "Marcus, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. This could be your path to becoming a professional pianist." That evening, Marcus sat with his mother in their small room. He'd told her everything about the scholarship, about the academy, about the chance to study with one of the world's best teachers. He expected her to be excited, but instead, she was quiet, her hands folded in her lap. "Mama?" Marcus asked softly. "What's wrong? I thought you'd be happy." She looked up, and he saw tears in her eyes. "I am happy, my son. So happy I could burst. But I'm also scared. This academy, it's on the other side of the city. You'd have to live there during the week. I'd only see you on weekends." Marcus hadn't thought about that. The idea of being away from his mother, of not seeing her tired but loving face every day, made his chest ache. "Maybe I shouldn't go then. Maybe I should stay here and keep taking lessons with Professor Williams." His mother grabbed his hands fiercely. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare give up this chance because of me. I've spent my whole life working hard so you could have opportunities I never had. This is what I've been working for, Marcus. This is the dream. But I'll miss you, and I'll miss you," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. "Every single minute. But I'll know you're following your dream, and that will make all the missing worthwhile." 2 weeks later, Marcus moved into the dormitory at Stanislavski Academy. The building was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the sound of piano music floating through every hallway. His room was small but clean, with an actual bed that had a real mattress, a desk, and a window that looked out over the practice rooms. His roommate was a boy named David, whose family owned a chain of hotels. David took one look at Marcus's small bag of belongings and his worn clothes and raised an eyebrow. "That's all you brought?" Marcus felt the familiar shame creeping back. "It's all I have." David was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, you're the one Victor Stanislavski asked for personally. That's more impressive than any amount of luggage." It wasn't exactly friendly, but it wasn't cruel either. Marcus would take it. Meeting Victor Stanislavski was intimidating. The master teacher was a tall man, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. He sat at a magnificent grand piano in his studio and gestured for Marcus to sit at another piano across from him. "Play something for me," Stanislavski said, in his thick accent. "Not something you've practiced. Something you feel right now." Marcus's hands shook as he placed them on the keys. This was different from performing for a school audience. This was performing for a master, someone who had taught some of the world's greatest pianists. What could he possibly play that would impress such a man? Then he stopped thinking and started feeling. He thought about his mother, about saying goodbye to her at the bus station that morning. He thought about her brave smile and the way her hand had lingered on his cheek, and he began to play, creating a melody on the spot, pouring his love and sadness and hope into improvised music. When he finished, Stanislavski was silent for a long moment. "You have a gift, young man. A rare gift. But gifts alone mean nothing without discipline, without endless work, without sacrifice. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said firmly. "We shall see," Stanislavski replied. "Your training begins tomorrow at 5 in the morning." The next months were the hardest of Marcus's life. Stanislavski was nothing like gentle Professor Williams. He was demanding, critical, and pushed Marcus beyond what he thought were his limits. 5 in the morning practice, classes until noon. More practice until dinner, then study until late at night. Marcus's fingers ached constantly. His back hurt from hours at the piano. There were nights he cried from exhaustion and frustration. The other students at the academy were all talented and came from wealthy families. They had been playing since they were 3 or 4 years old. They had perfect technique, could sight-read the most complex pieces, and spoke casually about concerts and competitions Marcus had never even heard of. He felt like an imposter. Despite Stanislavski's faith in him, despite the scholarship, he felt like he didn't belong among these polished, trained musicians. They wore designer clothes to practice sessions. They talked about vacations in Paris and summer homes in the countryside. They lived in a world Marcus could barely imagine. One day, after a particularly brutal practice session where Stanislavski had criticized every note Marcus played, he sat in the practice room long after everyone else had left. His hands rested on the keys, but he couldn't bring himself to play. What was the point? He'd never catch up to students who'd been training their whole lives. He was just a poor boy who'd gotten lucky for a moment. But luck eventually ran out. "Feeling sorry for yourself?" A voice broke through his thoughts. Marcus turned to see David standing in the doorway. His roommate walked over and sat on the bench next to him. "I've seen that look before. You're thinking about quitting. I don't belong here," Marcus said quietly. "Everyone else is so much better than me. They've had training and advantages I'll never have." David was quiet for a moment. "You want to know why Stanislavski chose you? Why he gives you such a hard time?" Marcus nodded. "For Div. Why Stanislavski? On Kaston. On Khan. Why Stanislavski? It's because he sees something in you that the rest of us don't have. We have technique. We have training. We can play all the notes perfectly. But you? You have something else. When you play, people feel something. That's why you're here, Marcus. Not to be like us, but to be better than us in the way that actually matters. But I can barely keep up with the technical training." "Then work harder," David said simply. "You've already proven you can do that. You learned in 9 months what took most of us years. Stop comparing yourself to where we are now and start thinking about where you'll be in 5 years, in 10 years, if you keep pushing." That conversation changed something in Marcus. He stopped feeling sorry for himself and started working even harder. If the other students practiced 4 hours, he practiced 6. If they mastered a piece in a week, he worked until he could master it in 5 days. He used his poverty, not as an excuse, but as fuel. Every time he wanted to quit, he thought about his mother's rough hands, her tired smile, her unwavering belief in him. Slowly, incredibly, he started catching up. By the end of his first year at the academy, Marcus was performing in student recitals and receiving praise not just for his emotional depth, but for his improving technique. Stanislavski, who rarely gave compliments, told him after one performance, "You are beginning to fulfill your potential." Coming from the harsh teacher, it felt like the highest praise possible. Marcus was becoming not just a pianist, but an artist, and his journey was only beginning. 3 years passed at Stanislavski Academy, and Marcus transformed from a talented beginner into a serious young pianist. He was now 16, and the thin boy with worn clothes had grown into a young man with calloused fingers and determined eyes. The academy provided him with proper concert attire, but he never forgot where he came from. On weekends, when he visited his mother, he still wore his old clothes and helped her with whatever work needed doing. His mother's life had improved slightly. The small stipend from Marcus's scholarship helped, and she'd been able to cut down to one job. But she still worked hard, still lived in the same small room above the bakery. Marcus dreamed of the day he could buy her a real house, a place where she wouldn't have to smell bread she couldn't afford. Stanislavski entered Marcus in his first major competition when he turned 17. The International Young Pianists Competition was one of the most prestigious events for musicians under 20. Winners often went on to successful careers, their names becoming known in concert halls around the world. "You're not ready to win," Stanislavski told him bluntly during preparation, "but you're ready to compete. You need to experience what it's like to perform under pressure, to be judged against the world's best young talents. This is about learning, not winning." Marcus accepted this. He wasn't playing to win anyway. He was playing because music had saved him, given him purpose, and he wanted to share that with anyone who would listen. The competition was being held in New York City, and it would be Marcus's first time leaving his home state. The journey to New York was overwhelming. Marcus had never been on a plane, never seen buildings that tall, never experienced crowds that massive. Stanislavski accompanied him, along with David, who was also competing. As they checked into the hotel, Marcus tried not to stare at the luxury around him. The lobby had actual fountains. Their rooms had more space than his mother's entire home. The competition venue was Carnegie Hall, and when Marcus first walked into the famous building, his legs went weak. This was where legends had performed. This stage had felt the fingers of the greatest pianists in history. And somehow, impossibly, he would perform here too. The competition lasted 3 days. 60 young pianists from around the world. Each one brilliant. Each one hungry for recognition. Marcus listened to other competitors during their practice sessions and felt his old insecurities returning. These weren't just talented students. These were prodigies who had been groomed for greatness since they could walk. They had private coaches, personal practice studios, and families that could afford to travel the world for competitions. One pianist, a girl named Sophia from Russia, played with such technical perfection that Marcus felt sick watching her. Her fingers flew across the keys at impossible speeds, never missing a note, never showing strain. After her practice session, she walked past Marcus with barely a glance. Her expensive designer outfit, a stark reminder of the different worlds they came from. The night before his performance, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with doubts. What if he froze on stage? What if his hands shook? What if everyone could tell he didn't belong among these privileged, perfectly trained musicians? At 2 a.m, he gave up on sleep and went to one of the practice rooms in the hotel basement. He sat at the piano and just rested his hands on the keys, not playing, just feeling the cool smoothness beneath his fingers. He thought about the first time he'd heard Professor Williams play, how the music had made him feel like maybe life could be beautiful despite everything. He thought about his mother's sacrifices, her belief in him. He thought about David's words, about having something the others didn't, and then he played. Not the competition piece, but an improvisation, a melody that came from his heart. He played for his mother, for Professor Williams, for every hard morning and every difficult practice session. He played for the boy he used to be, the one in dirty clothes who everyone mocked. And somehow, in that moment, his fear disappeared. The next day, Marcus performed his competition piece, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most challenging and beloved works in the repertoire. As he sat on stage with the orchestra behind him, as the conductor raised his baton, Marcus felt a strange calm. He was ready. Not because he was the most technically skilled, not because he'd been training longest, but because he knew why he was playing. The opening notes crashed through the hall, and Marcus poured his soul into the music. He played with technical precision that had taken him years to develop, but also with an emotional depth that couldn't be taught. His hands, which had once scrubbed floors and carried heavy loads, now commanded one of the world's most demanding concertos. Every note carried his journey, his pain, his hope. In the audience, Stanislavski sat with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. But inside, the old master felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Pure, overwhelming pride. This boy had exceeded every expectation. He wasn't just good, he was extraordinary. When Marcus finished, the applause was thunderous. Not polite, not merely appreciative, but genuinely enthusiastic. People stood. They cheered. And for the first time in the competition, Marcus saw something in the other competitors' eyes. Not dismissal, not condescension, but respect. The results were announced that evening at a formal ceremony. Marcus sat in his borrowed tuxedo, trying not to fidget. He didn't expect to win. Third place would be amazing. Even an honorable mention would be more than he'd hoped for. Around him, other competitors and their families sat in expensive gowns and suits, whispering predictions about who would take the top prizes. Third place, the announcer began, goes to Vincent Chen from Singapore. Applause. Vincent walked up to receive his medal and certificate, his family beaming with pride. Second place goes to Sofia Volkov from Russia. Marcus watched the technically perfect girl walk up to accept her award. Her face showed disappointment. Clearly, she'd expected first place. Marcus's heart pounded. That meant first place was going to someone else, someone probably more deserving. He started to relax, accepting that he wouldn't place at all. He'd performed well, learned from the experience, and that was enough. And first place. The announcer's voice rose with excitement. In a decision that was unanimous among all 5 judges, goes to Marcus Rivera from the United States. For a moment, Marcus didn't move. He couldn't have heard that correctly. His name? First place? Stanislavski had to practically push him out of his seat. Marcus walked to the stage in a daze, his legs moving automatically. The announcer placed a gold medal around his neck and handed him a trophy and an envelope. "The judges want me to read their statement," the announcer said, turning to the audience. "Mr. Rivera's performance was technically excellent, but what set him apart was something rare in musicians of any age. He doesn't just play music, he lives it. Every note came from a place of deep understanding and emotion. We have no doubt that we will be hearing this name for many years to come." The applause was deafening. Marcus stood there, holding his trophy, unable to believe this was real. He looked out at the audience and saw Stanislavski standing and clapping, tears on the old man's face. He saw David cheering and whistling. And he wished, more than anything, that his mother could be there to see this moment. Backstage, reporters wanted interviews. Other competitors came to congratulate him. Their respect, genuine now. Sophia approached him, and Marcus expected coldness, but instead she smiled. She said simply, "I play perfectly, but you play truthfully. That's harder to achieve. She play, by do thou. She play. I play perfectly. She play. She play, truthfully." The competition came with a prize of $10,000. It was more money than Marcus had ever imagined having. That night, He called his mother from the hotel room, his hands shaking as he dialed. "Mama?" His mother's sob of joy came through the phone, and Marcus broke down crying. All the years of struggle, all the mockery, all the doubt. It had led to this. He was 17 years old, and he'd just won one of the world's most prestigious piano competitions. The boy they'd called the garbage boy, the kid with dirty clothes they'd mocked and dismissed, had proven them all wrong. But Marcus knew this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. The real work, the real challenges, still lay ahead. Yet for this one night, he let himself feel the pride, the joy, the satisfaction of knowing that hard work and dedication could triumph over poverty and prejudice. He'd earned this moment, every note of it, and nobody could take that away from him. Winning the International Young Pianists competition changed everything. Within weeks, Marcus received invitations to perform at concert halls across the country. Recording companies wanted to meet with him. Music magazines requested interviews. The boy who'd once been invisible, except as a target for mockery, was suddenly in demand. But success brought complications Marcus hadn't anticipated. A famous talent manager named Richard Sterling flew to meet with him, offering representation that could launch his career to new heights. Sterling was a smooth-talking man in expensive suits who made promises that sounded like dreams. "You could be the next great concert pianist," Sterling told him over lunch at a restaurant where the menu had no prices. "But you need the right management, the right image, the right connections. I can give you all of that." Stanislavski, however, was skeptical. "Be careful, Marcus," he warned. "People like Sterling see you as a product, not a person. They'll want to control everything about you, including your music." Marcus was torn. Sterling's promises were tempting. With proper management, he could earn enough money to finally give his mother the life she deserved. But Stanislavski's concern weighed on him too. The old master had guided him this far. Shouldn't he trust his judgment? The decision became harder when Marcus learned the details of Sterling's offer. The manager wanted him to sign an exclusive contract for 5 years. He'd arrange concerts, negotiate fees, handle all business matters, but he'd also take 30% of everything Marcus earned, and he'd have final say on what Marcus performed, where, and when. "I need to think about it," Marcus told Sterling. "Don't think too long," the manager replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Opportunities like this don't wait forever. You're hot right now, kid. But fame is fickle. Strike while you can." That night, Marcus visited his mother. She still lived in the small room above the bakery, though Marcus had used some of his prize money to buy her new furniture and insist she finally take some time off work. She was cooking dinner, her movements slower now, her hair grayer than Marcus remembered from just months ago. Seeing her age hurt something deep in his chest. He told her about Sterling's offer, about the money, about the fame. His mother listened quietly, stirring the pot on the stove, her face thoughtful. "What does your teacher say?" she asked finally. "He doesn't trust Sterling. He thinks I should wait. Build my career more slowly. Maintain control of my artistic choices." His mother turned to face him, wiping her hands on her apron. "And what does your heart say?" Marcus was quiet. In his heart, he knew Stanislavski was right. Sterling saw him as a commodity, not an artist. But the money could change his mother's life immediately. Wasn't that worth sacrificing some artistic control? "I see what you're thinking," his mother said softly, sitting beside him. "You're thinking about me, about how this money could help me. Am I right?" Marcus nodded. "My son, listen carefully. I didn't raise you and sacrifice all these years so you could sell your soul for my comfort. I can work a few more years. What I can't do is watch you betray everything you believe in for my sake. Your music is pure, Marcus. Don't let anyone corrupt it. Not even for me." Her words settled something in Marcus. He called Sterling the next day and declined the offer. The manager wasn't pleased. "You're making a mistake, kid. You'll regret this when the spotlight moves to someone else." But Marcus didn't regret it. Instead, with Stanislavski's guidance, he chose a different path. He accepted select concert invitations, building his reputation through the quality of his performances rather than aggressive marketing. He enrolled in a prestigious conservatory to continue his education, and he started teaching piano to young students, passing on what he'd learned. One of his first students was a 9-year-old girl named Amy from a poor neighborhood. Her mother worked 3 jobs and had heard about Marcus's story. She showed up at the conservatory with Amy, hope and desperation in her eyes. "We can't afford regular lessons," she admitted. "But my daughter, she loves music so much. I thought maybe, since you know what it's like to struggle, you might consider." Marcus looked at the girl, saw her worn shoes and patched dress, saw the hunger in her eyes when she looked at the piano. He saw himself 5 years ago. "Bring her every Saturday morning," he told the mother. No charge. Amy became the first of many students Marcus taught for free. Word spread in the community about the young pianist, who hadn't forgotten where he came from. Soon, Marcus was teaching a dozen kids from poor families, sharing his gift the way Professor Williams and Stanislavski had shared theirs with him. As Marcus's reputation grew, so did the demands on his time. He performed at Carnegie Hall again, this time as a featured soloist. He toured Europe, playing in Vienna, Paris, and London. Critics praised his remarkable emotional depth and technical brilliance tempered with genuine feeling. But the tour also separated him from his mother for months. They talked on the phone when they could, but the distance ached. In Munich, after a particularly successful concert, Marcus called her from his hotel room. "Mama, I have enough money now," he told her. "Real money. I want to buy you a house. A real house. With a garden and enough rooms that you never feel cramped. Let me do this for you." He heard her crying softly. "Oh, my boy. My successful, wonderful boy. Yes, yes, I'll let you do this. Not because I need it, but because I know you need to give it, just as you needed to play piano. Some things we do for ourselves, even when we tell ourselves we're doing them for others." Marcus bought his mother a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with modern appliances, and a tiny garden where she could grow vegetables. The day she moved in, Marcus was there to help. As she walked through each room, touching the walls like she couldn't believe they were real, Marcus felt a satisfaction deeper than any applause had ever given him. But challenges continued. At 20, Marcus faced criticism from some classical music purists who felt he was too emotional, too unconventional in his interpretations. A particularly harsh review in a major publication called his playing technically adequate but emotionally manipulative, relying on sentiment rather than substance. The review stung. Marcus read it over and over, each word cutting deeper. Was the critic right? Was he just trading on his backstory, on emotion, rather than genuine artistry? Stanislavski found him in a practice room. The review crumpled on the piano. The old master read it, then tossed it in the trash. That critic is a fool who has forgotten why music exists. Yes, there are pianists with better technique than you. Yes, there are those who play with more precision. But technique without emotion is just noise. You make people feel. Marcus, that's your gift. Never apologize for it. But what if he's right? What if I'm not good enough? You won the International Young Pianists competition. You sell out concert halls. You make audiences weep and cheer. You teach children who would never have a chance otherwise. Tell me, who decides if you're good enough? Some critic sitting in the dark, or the thousands of people whose lives you've touched with your music? Those words helped, but doubt remained. Marcus pushed himself harder, practicing longer hours, working on his technique with fierce dedication. He was determined to prove that he wasn't just an emotional player but a complete musician. The real test came when he was invited to perform at the International Piano Masters Festival, competing against pianists decades older and more experienced. It was an honor just to be invited at his age. But Marcus wanted to prove he belonged there, on merit, not sympathy or novelty. He chose to perform one of the most technically demanding pieces in the repertoire, Liszt's Transcendental Etudes. For months, he worked on it obsessively. His fingers had to move faster than ever before. The coordination required was extreme. The night of the performance, Marcus walked onto the stage of the Sydney Opera House. He was 21 years old, performing alongside pianists in their 40s and 50s who had been playing professionally for decades. He sat at the piano, looked out at the audience of thousands, and remembered the boy who'd stood outside a window listening to piano music for the first time. Then he began to play. And he played not just with emotion, not just with technique, but with both, in perfect balance. His hands flew across the keys with precision that matched any virtuoso, but every note still carried meaning, still told a story. He'd learned to combine the best of both worlds. The technical excellence his critics demanded, and the emotional depth that was his natural gift. When he finished, the applause lasted 5 minutes. The critic from the harsh review was in the audience, and later wrote a retraction, admitting he'd underestimated Marcus's abilities. Other pianists came backstage to congratulate him, treating him as an equal rather than a novelty. That night, Marcus stood on the balcony of his hotel room, looking out at Sydney Harbor. He thought about his journey, from the poor boy in dirty clothes to this moment. He thought about all the people who'd helped him along the way and all the obstacles he'd overcome. And he realized something important. He hadn't reached the peak yet. There was still so much further to go. So many more heights to climb. But for now, in this moment, he could appreciate how far he'd come. 10 years after that first morning, when Marcus heard piano music through a window, he stood backstage at the most prestigious venue in classical music. The Royal Albert Hall in London was hosting a special concert celebrating the greatest pianists of the new generation. And Marcus, now 22, was the featured performer. But this concert was different. This wasn't just another performance. Tonight, Marcus would premiere a piece he'd composed himself, something he'd been working on for 2 years. He'd titled it simply, The Journey, and it told his story through music. Every note represented something from his past, from poverty to discovery, from mockery to triumph. His mother was in the audience, flown in specially for the occasion. She wore a beautiful dress Marcus had bought her, though she'd protested it was too expensive. Stanislavski was there too, now in his 80s but still sharp and demanding. Professor Williams had made the journey as well, frail but determined to see his former student perform on the world's greatest stage. David, his old roommate from the academy, was also performing that night. They'd remained close friends, and David had gone on to become a successful pianist in his own right. He found Marcus in the green room before the show. "Nervous?" David asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "This piece, it's so personal. What if people don't understand it? What if they think it's self-indulgent?" David laughed. "Marcus, you've performed for kings and presidents. You've played in every major concert hall in the world. And you're worried about being self-indulgent? Play your truth. That's what you've always done best." The concert began with other performers, young pianists from around the world, each brilliant in their own way. Marcus watched from the wings, remembering what it felt like to be the newcomer, the underdog. So much had changed, yet he still felt like that nervous boy sometimes, afraid his success would vanish if he made one wrong move. Finally, it was his turn. The announcer introduced him with a brief biography that still amazed Marcus when he heard it. Awards, performances, critical acclaim. It was his life. But sometimes, it felt like someone else's story. Marcus walked onto the stage, and the applause washed over him. He'd learned to accept it now, to feel grateful, rather than unworthy. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. Then, he began to play The Journey. The piece opened with dissonant, harsh notes representing his childhood poverty and struggle. The melody was broken, searching, like a question without an answer. He could see his mother in the audience, tears already streaming down her face. She knew what these notes meant, felt the hunger and cold and fear in them. Then the music shifted. A single clear note rang out, pure and hopeful. This was the moment he'd first heard piano music. The moment everything changed. The melody became curious, exploring. Like a child discovering something magical, his fingers danced across the keys, telling the story of those early morning lessons with Professor Williams. The dedication, the hard work. The middle section grew more complex, representing his time at the academy. The technical challenges he'd faced were reflected in the difficult passages, the integration of multiple themes showing how he'd learned to blend emotion with precision. There were moments of darkness, too, representing the doubt, the criticism, the times he'd wanted to give up, but the music always found its way back to hope, because that was the truth of his journey. No matter how hard things got, he'd always had people who believed in him. His mother, Professor Williams, Stanislavski, David. Their faith was represented by a recurring theme that wove through the entire piece. A musical reminder that he'd never truly been alone. The final section built to a triumphant climax. All the themes came together. The struggle and the hope, the poverty and the success, the pain and the joy. His hands moved across the keys with complete confidence now, creating a sound that filled the massive hall. This was who he'd become, not despite his past, but because of it. The piece ended softly, echoing the opening notes but transformed. The same melody that had been harsh and broken now sounded peaceful, resolved. Marcus lifted his hands from the keys and sat still for a moment, overwhelmed by the emotion of what he'd just shared. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the audience erupted. People leaped to their feet, applauding, cheering, but Marcus barely heard them. He was looking at his mother, at Professor Williams, at Stanislavski. They were all standing, all crying, and their faces told him everything he needed to know. They understood. The music had communicated what words never could. Later, at the reception, Marcus was surrounded by admirers, critics, and fellow musicians. Everyone wanted to congratulate him, to shake his hand, to be associated with his success, but he kept looking around for the people who'd been there from the beginning. He found his mother sitting in a quiet corner, looking exhausted but happy. He sat beside her, taking her rough, work-worn hand in his. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Not because you're famous or successful. I'd be proud even if you were still playing in that school music room. I'm proud because you never forgot who you are, where you came from. You stayed kind, stayed humble, stayed true. Too. Everything I am is because of you, Mama," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every sacrifice you made, every meal you skipped, every night you worked instead of slept. This success isn't just mine. It's ours." Professor Williams approached them, moving slowly with his cane. Marcus stood and embraced him carefully. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else." "I didn't do anything special," the old man replied. "I just recognized talent when I heard it. You did all the hard work, Marcus. You and your determination." Stanislavski was his usual gruff self, but even he couldn't hide his pride. "You've exceeded my expectations," he told Marcus. "And I had high expectations. That piece tonight, it was good. Very good. Though the transition in the middle section could be smoother." End quote. "That's one." Marcus laughed. Even in triumph, his old teacher couldn't resist a critique. "I'll work on it, master." "See that you do," Stanislavski replied, but his eyes were warm. You have the potential to be truly great, Marcus. Not just a good pianist, but one who will be remembered. Don't waste it." As the night wore on and the reception wound down, Marcus found himself alone on the now empty stage. The hall was dark, the audience gone. He sat at the piano one more time and played softly, just for himself. No audience, no critics, no pressure. Just a boy and his music, the way it had started. He thought about Derek, the bully from school. Marcus had heard he was working in his father's business now, living an ordinary life. No hard feelings remained. That mockery, that cruelty, had fueled Marcus's determination. In a strange way, Derek had helped shape him. He thought about all the children he was teaching, kids from poor families who reminded him of himself. He'd started a foundation to provide free music lessons and instruments to underprivileged youth. It was his way of ensuring that talent wouldn't be wasted just because someone couldn't afford lessons. He thought about his dirty clothes from years ago, the source of so much shame. He'd kept those clothes, stored in a box in his apartment. Sometimes, when success felt overwhelming or when he started taking things for granted, he'd take them out and look at them. They reminded him of who he'd been, of how far he'd come, of why he could never stop working hard. The next morning, newspapers and websites were filled with reviews of the concert. Critics called The Journey a masterpiece, praising its emotional honesty and technical brilliance. One review said, "Marcus Rivera has achieved what few artists ever do. He has transformed personal pain into universal beauty. Created art that speaks to anyone who has ever struggled, anyone who has ever hoped." But the review that meant the most to Marcus was a simple social media post from one of his students. A 10-year-old girl from the poor neighborhood where he taught. She'd watched a recording of the concert with her mother, and she'd written, "When I grow up, I want to be just like Mr. Marcus. He shows me that where you start doesn't decide where you finish." That message, more than any critical acclaim or standing ovation, told Marcus that he'd accomplished something meaningful. He wasn't just a successful pianist, he was proof that poverty didn't have to be destiny. That mockery and hardship could be overcome with dedication and support. That a boy with dirty clothes could indeed become one of the world's greatest musicians. Marcus Rivera went on to have a career that spanned decades. He performed in every major concert hall in the world, won countless awards, made numerous recordings. But he never moved far from his roots. He continued teaching underprivileged children, continued supporting music education for those who couldn't afford it, continued being the kind of artist who remembered that music wasn't about ego or fame, but about connection and truth. Years later, when interviewers would ask him about his success, about his journey from poverty to prominence, Marcus would always say the same thing. "I didn't do it alone. Every person who showed me kindness, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who saw past my dirty clothes to the person underneath, they're all part of this success. We rise together, or we don't rise at all. And we look problem." And in that philosophy, in that humble acknowledgement of the role others played in his journey, Marcus proved that he hadn't just become a great pianist. He'd become a great human being. The boy they'd mocked for his dirty clothes had grown into a man the world respected, not just for his talent, but for his character, his generosity, and his unwavering commitment to helping others find their own path to success. His story became inspiration for countless others. Proof that circumstances at birth don't determine destiny. That talent and determination can overcome poverty and prejudice. That the world sometimes does reward hard work and genuine passion. Marcus Rivera had started with nothing but a love for music and a mother who believed in him. He'd turned that into everything, and in doing so, he'd shown the world that greatness doesn't come from privilege or perfect circumstances. It comes from within, from the courage to keep playing even when everyone says you don't belong at the piano.